Good morning to one and all. Today we are going to discuss about the topic aminoglycosides. Very commonly, all of us know what are aminoglycosides. So, an overview, we see what are aminoglycosides. They are protein synthesis inhibitors. Okay, so we have seen in the general concentration of antimicrobials about what is the protein synthesis inhibitors. So there are various drugs which come under this protein synthesis inhibitors. Among them, we have studied that the broad spectrum antibiotics such as the tetracyclines, the chloramphenicol, which come under the protein synthesis inhibitors. Then we have this group called aminoglycosides, considering all the antibiotics like gentamicin, amikacin, neomycin, streptomycin, and tobramycin. And then the other groups which involve this protein synthesis inhibitors are the macrolide groups of drugs like erythromycin, azithromycin, roxastromycin, and clarithromycin. And we have the miscellaneous like clindamycin, linezolid, and the common antibiotics which like chloramphenicol, quinipristine, and dalfopristin. So these all come under the protein synthesis inhibitors. So if you see the number of antibiotics expert their antimicrobial effects by targeting bacterial ribosomes and inhibiting the bacterial protein synthesis. So most of these agents exhibit bacteriostatic activity, and this bacterial ribosomes differ structurally from the mammalian cytoplasmic ribosomes and are composed of 30S and 50S subunits. Mainly the 50S subunits come under the mammalian ribosomes, which have 40 and 60S subunits. So in general, selectivity for bacterial ribosomes minimize the potential adverse effects encountered with the disruption of the protein synthesis in the mammalian. So, however, high concentration of drugs such as chloramphenicol or tetracycline may cause toxic effects as a result of interactions with mitochondrial mammalian ribosomes. So, we have to summarize the antimicrobial protein synthesis inhibitors as we have discussed in the thing. So, when it comes to the aminoglycosides, these are groups of potent bactericidal action and are used primarily to treat infections caused by aerobic gram-negative organisms and have a synergistic action to treat certain gram-positive organisms. So we have seen so many drugs which come under this aminoglycosides. So like example, we can think about streptomycin, gentamicin, tobramycin, amikacin, and netlimycin and kanamycin. So you're thinking of the suffix mycin, MYCIN. We can remember all these drugs which are potent bactericidal antibiotics primarily treating the infections caused by aerobic gram-negative organisms. So that is the most common thing which we have to keep in mind. Okay. So we have certain common properties when you want to discuss about this aminoglycosides. So the common properties are mainly they contain an amino sugar linked with the hexose group, glycosidic. They affect gram-negative organisms only, with the exceptions like amikacin, which has a remarkable activity against methicillin-resistant Staphylo aureus groups. Okay, they are administered mainly by parenteral, intramuscularly or intravenously, as their absorption through the GI tract is very poor. So they exhibit concentration-dependent bactericidal activity with an increase of action on increased concentration of the drug. So this action is also seen with the quinolone, which we will be discussing in the next class. So they possess post-antibiotic effect and continue to kill the bacteria even after their plasma levels fall below the minimal inhibitory concentration. So these terminologies are new to us. We have to have an idea about this. What do you mean by post-antibiotic effect? What do you mean by minimal inhibition concentration. Okay. So the other common properties is they are toxic, ototoxic and nephrotoxic with slight variability among the compounds. So they can be given once daily, and they are usually useful in fulminating conditions like bacterial endocarditis, urinary tract infections, septicemia, and pulmonary tuberculosis. So the common drugs which are used in tuberculosis will be saying the first line drug, streptomycin, and when it comes to the second line drugs, we can use kanamycin. Okay, so seeing the common properties, we can list out that they are commonly used for gram-negative organisms. The next point for us to remember is they can be used, that is, certain drugs can be used in like example like in methicillin resistance Staphylo aureus, there are certain aminoglycosides which can be used, and also we can use them in conditions like tuberculosis. Okay, so you can keep in mind that streptomycin, which is the first line drug used in tuberculosis, and with the kanamycin, which is the second line drug used in pulmonary tuberculosis. Okay, and apart from that, we can think about what are the other uses, like in fulminating conditions like bacterial endocarditis, urinary tract infections, septicemia. Okay, and the common adverse effects are all the drugs are ototoxic and nephrotoxic with slightly variability among the compounds. So we have to just be so when we read about any antimicrobial, the common thing for us to remember is the spectrum, the antimicrobial spectrum. So, what are the commonest organisms which these aminoglycosides can be susceptible to? So, when you think of E. coli, gram-negative Salmonella, Shigella, Enterobacteria, Cytobacteria, Klebsiella, and Pseudomonas, and Staphylococcus. So, all these drugs are having some susceptibility to the aminoglycoside groups. And when it is a synergistic activity, especially enterococci and streptococci, they have a synergistic activity which we can combine with beta-lactams and vancomycin. Okay, so actually we can use them we can have a synergistic action when we combine gram-negative aminoglycoside drugs with other drugs like which are very particular with gram positive, especially with penicillin groups, cephalosporin groups, and in drugs like vancomycin. Okay, so seeing the mechanism, all of us we just in general considerations we have seen the protein synthesis inhibitors and involving the subunits. So here we are particular when it is with aminoglycosides with 30S subunits. So aminoglycosides bind to the bacterial ribosome and it is irreversibly and inhibiting the protein synthesis. So here 30S subunits of the bacterial ribosome is the target site for the action on the aminoglycosides. Okay, so the commonest the picture which explains the mechanism of action. So you can see the various drugs which involved in the protein synthesis inhibitor. So you can see the 30S, 50S. You can see the DNA, the DNA dependent RNA gyrinase, where the involvement of the drug is the quinolones. You can see the DNA dependent RNA polymerase enzyme, which is involved for rifampicin, and you can see the involvement of 30S ribosome, which is with the help of 30S inhibitor complex, where you can see tetracyclines and aminoglycosides play a vital role, and you can see the 70S ribosomal messenger RNA inhibition complex, where here it is dealing with 30 and 50S ribosomes. Then you can also see the polyribosomal translocation peptide bond formation, which with the help of 30S. So here drugs like chloramphenicol, erythromycin, and clindamycin. So that is why we listed out the drugs commonly which inhibit the protein synthesis inhibitors. So here we are very particular about the aminoglycosides. So you can see at the level of 30S, where the messenger RNA we are using we are preventing the 30S inhibitor complex, which with the help of this inhibitor, these aminoglycosides prevent the further 30 and 50S responsible for forming the polyribosomal translocation peptide bond formation. Okay, so it is a chain reaction like that where we are inhibiting at what level we are trying to even inhibit the cellular changes with the help of the antibiotic. So that is what we have to keep in mind. So in broad aspect, we are saying it is a protein synthesis inhibitor. So that we should be very clear. We should remember parallelly what are the other drugs which are coming to inhibit the protein synthesis inhibitor. So here, as we saw that 30 subunits of the bacterial ribosomes is targeted with the help of these aminoglycosides, and these aminoglycosides bind to the bacterial ribosome, which are irreversible. Okay, that is the point we have to, and inhibit the protein synthesis. So these points should be remembered when you want to think about the aminoglycoside mechanisms. Okay, then here when we are reading about the kinetics, we are just more particular when we say it is nephrotoxic. So seeing the creatinine clearance and the recommended daily doses are being listed out as for the creatinine clearance. So if the creatinine clearance per ml per minute is around 100, then classifying the various aminoglycosides like gentamicin, amikacin, netlimicin. So here around 3 to 5 milligrams per kg water if the creatinine clearance is about 100. In case of 10 to 15 milligrams per kg, if the same creatinine clearance is 100 per ml. And in case of netlimicin, 3 to 6 milligrams per kg, if the creatinine clearance is 100 ml per minute. So based on the creatinine clearance, the recommended daily dose of aminoglycosides is based on the different types of aminoglycosides. Okay, so it is based on the creatinine clearance, that how much milligrams per dosage per kg body weight you have to prescribe the drug. So we have a lot of examples for this. So the kinetic aspects help us in knowing the toxicity levels during the clinical usage of the drug. Okay, so then when it comes to the uses, we are very specified with the various drugs and they are specific uses. So when it comes to streptomycin, we have listed out that it is used to be first-line drugs for tuberculosis. So bacterial endocarditis, which can be used as a synergy or it can be used in combinations with penicillins or vancomycin. And in case of mycobacterial infections, definitely we use it in combination with the first-line drugs like INH, ethambutol, pyrazimide, and rifampicin. And the various other uses of streptomycin we can list it out in plague, tularemia, and brucellosis. So these are the other uses of streptomycin apart from mycobacterial infections and bacterial endocarditis. So very commonly asked MCQ where you can they list out the uses of streptomycin and they can ask you exception or they can ask you apart from mycobacterial what are the uses of streptomycin. So you have to keep the other uses in mind like plague, tularemia, and brucellosis. So for all these things also we can use streptomycin. Okay. So and then coming over to the gentamicin, which is gram mainly used in gram-negative infections, even in severe conditions like sepsis, burns condition, osteomyelitis, pneumonia, peritonitis, and it can be used in combinations for along with the extended spectrum penicillins or cephalosporins. So these are used not only for the elective conditions, also in serious life-threatening conditions like sepsis, burns, osteomyelitis, and pneumonia. So very common. So, but the spectrum is expanded when you use it in combinations with either penicillins or cephalosporins. Okay. So gentamicin can be used in combinations with penicillins and cephalosporins. So the other common uses where you can use it in bacterial endocarditis, urinary tract infections, nosocomial infection, nosocomial pneumonia, and used typically for infected burn wounds and skin lesions. Okay, so we can think of these organisms, especially in nosocomial infections as well as in life-threatening infections where various organisms are involved, especially in sepsis, burns, osteomyelitis, and in hospital or hospital acquired infections like pneumonia. Okay, so we have to think about all these conditions, and such condition it is used with extended spectrums of penicillins and cephalosporins. So it is used in combinations. So we have to keep this in mind. Okay. Then very common use the drug tobramycin, which can be used in originator and can be given in solutions which is 300 milligrams in 5 ml for inhalations, especially for the treatment of lower respiratory tract infections. And so the point for us to remember that we can use for inhalation. So very commonly asked a one-word question or a MCQ, which aminoglycoside is used in the form of inhalation. So the drug will be tobramycin. So we can use tobramycin as inhalation, especially for the treatment of lower respiratory tract infection when it is very specific with Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So, and also Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is complicated in cystic fibrosis. In such conditions, we can use this drug tobramycin in the form of inhalation. Okay, so this is also for us to remember. And the other commonest gentamicin, which is clinically used, is amikacin. So this amikacin is very commonly used in septicemia, especially in neonatal sepsis, and it's used in nosocomial bacterial infections, especially resistant to the previous drug gentamicin or tobramycin. And it is also used in respiratory tract infections which are not responding with the gentamicin or tobramycin, and especially in complicated urinary tract infections. So very commonly, these infections are not responding to gentamicin or tobramycin, the choice would be amikacin. So the next drug which is very commonly used is netlimycin, kanamycin, and neomycin. So netlimycin, we have complicated urinary tract infection. Kanamycin as a reserve drug for tuberculosis, prophylactic agent for preoperative bowel sterilization. So we have to think that even sterilization as a preoperative, we can use certain aminoglycosides. So the drug which can be used is promptly, which is used as kanamycin. Okay, and the neomycin, which can be used as a topical agent. So topical antibacterial agents, especially for irrigation of the bladder, preoperative bowel sterilization, and in case of hepatic coma, which to suppress the coliform flora. So in such conditions also we can use the topical antibacterial agents like neomycin. So the various routes apart from the intramuscular, intravenous, we are using topically, we are using by inhalation also. So a lot of routes of administrations are being used. So it's specific, we should think about the drugs which are used in different routes and remember them so that when it comes to a clinical condition, you can apply it. Okay, so such things are there for us to remember. And when it comes to common adverse effects, we are very well known that it has phototoxicity and nephrotoxicity. So that is why we are seeing the clearance of using the drugs. And the next, which will be the very important thing is that we should be very careful when we are using aminoglycosides and skeletal muscle relaxants, which can lead to neuromuscular blockage. So there are a lot of clinical conditions where aminoglycosides itself, along with the skeletal muscle relaxants, when used, may land up in neuromuscular blockage. So the very common adverse effects are being used over there. We should be very careful when you're using the clinic. The drug history is very important whenever you're using a skeletal muscle relaxant. So administration of such aminoglycosides along with neuromuscular blockade, along with skeletal muscle relaxants, can lead to neuromuscular blockade. So we should be very careful. We have take a drug history before administering any skeletal muscle relaxants. Okay, so these are the things which you have to keep. So the take-home message will be common side effects. Think about the oto, nephro, and the neuromuscular blockade. Then think about the various aminoglycosides which are being used and the various routes which we can think about. So when it comes to topical, think about neomycin. When it comes to the bowel sterilization, think about kanamycin. And when it comes to inhalation, think about amic acid. Okay. So these are the things. Think about the common properties of aminoglycosides. Remember the mechanism which is involving the protein synthesis inhibitors, and have a spectrum of antimicrobial activity which is mostly gram negative, and what are the various antibiotics responding, and also remember the drugs which will when you use aminoglycosides with extended spectrum penicillins and cephalosporins. So these points should be remembered, and remember the drugs which are being used and the routes which we are using. And when it comes to the ototoxicity and nephrotoxicity, we are very particular about the creatinine clearance based for the dosage of the thing. Okay, so keep these points in mind, which will be helping us when we go to the clinical side. So we'll be discussing about various problems and the clinical problems where based on using various endoglycosides and their drug interactions. Okay, thank you.